Hello and welcome back to another episode on the Stripe Developers YouTube channel here. Today we've got a really exciting session for you. We're going to be building some SaaS tools, but we're going to use no code today. So welcome back again. I'm CJ from the Stripe Developer Advocacy team, and I'm joined by Ben from Stripe and TJ from Bubble, the resident experts in both no code and SaaS. And so we've got a really exciting set of demos today for you. So maybe we could start with a round of introductions. TJ, do you mind going first? Tell us kind of like, a little bit about yourself, and then maybe Ben, if you can go second.
Cool. Yeah. So hello, my name is TJ Andrews. I'm a software engineer at Bubble. Primarily, I focus on the user experience of our visual editor, as well as the onboarding, education, and payment flows, which includes our Stripe integration. And Ben.
Yeah, I'm Ben. I'm one of the engineers on the billing team, and I'm currently involved a lot in a lot of Stripe's no-code efforts. So I'm excited to be here and kind of show off what we've got going on.
Awesome. I know, Ben, you've done a ton of stuff with Bubble before. You've done demos with Bubble, and now that you're at Stripe, I think, you and TJ combined, we're going to see some really cool stuff today. So why don't we go through first? If TJ, do you mind kind of just showing us some tips and tricks for how we might work with Bubble, and then we'll get into the Stripe stuff in the second half here.
Cool. Sounds great. So first, for folks that aren't familiar with Bubble, Bubble is a visual programming framework that lets people build and deploy custom web apps. So we've got a powerful point-and-click web editor, built-in database, and cloud hosting platform that allows you to design interfaces, build workflows, and create complex marketplaces, SaaS products, and more. I'm going to give a high-level intro of how Bubble's basic interface works, and then deep dive a little bit more into our plugin system so that it can set up Ben for what he's going to show in a little bit. So first, over here on the left is the tabs. So there's 7 tabs to help build your app. So starting with the design tab, this is for defining your app's visual appearance. Workflows are for defining user interaction. Data for managing data your users create. Styles for creating reusable designs, plugins for adding extended functionality, settings to define app-wide controls and connect to external services with one click, and logs to monitor apps usage and activity. So now let's walk through plugins. The main plugins I want to show off or demonstrate today are the Stripe plugin and the API connector plugin, which is what Ben will be using later for showing how to work with Stripe Customer Portal. So you go to the plugins tab, you click add plugins. Over here on the left, there's filters you can use. And also we have free and premium plugins. So what I'm going to show today are both free and built by Bubble. We have third-party developers or Bubble, or you can just search. So if I type Stripe, we can install that real quick, and then API. The API connector. I get that one. Cool. So first we'll start with the API connector. So this is a special plugin built by Bubble that lets you connect to any service that exposes a JSON-based RESTful web API. We can use it to fetch data from an external service or post data to trigger some actions. So I'll do a quick example with a basic API that I built outside of this app. So first I just click add an API. We'll call this fun facts because this is really just going to grab some facts from this API, and then we can display it to our users. So first we need to define a call. So the call can just be get facts. In here, we can say like what kind of HTTP method we want to use. In here, we're just going to use a get, but we could use others, of course. So this is the RESTful endpoint that I've created. We can call this from the browser. So I'll check that box. And you have to initialize the call before it can work, which is basically mapping this data to Bubble. So we can use it inside of our Bubble app. In here, we see like what kind of things come back from this API. So if we wanted to not use some of this, like I don't care about the created date or the created by, we can ignore the fields. What I really care about is this fact here, which is the text. So I'll just save this. Let me just show you real quick how to use it in the design tab. So go into here, create a text. We'll call this fun fact. And we'll be getting dynamic data from this. So we just click dynamic data, get data from an external API. And this is an API we created. And now what we want is the response, which is actually a list. So from a list, we can do a lot of things. We could get the first item, the last item, but I think we want a random item here. and we want the fact, which is going to be text. So now it's basically saying we'll have fun facts and then some text afterwards. And we can style this, make it a little bit bolder. So let's just make it dark. Now we can preview it and let's just see what it does. So now this is live on the web, and if you go to this URL, this is debug mode here, which has this down here, but you don't have to use that. Fun fact: an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain. If I refresh the page, it should get another random fun fact. And to prove what it's actually doing, almonds are a member of the peach family. So if we look at the network traffic, it's actually going to this facts API, grabbing the response. There's 7 of them, and getting a random one. So yeah, that's kind of a high-level overview of how we use the API connector. It's much more powerful than that contrived example, but I think that kind of gives you an example of what you can do with the API connector. For Stripe, we actually have built sort of this in-house app that we use for our plugin that can do tons of different actions. So if I go to the plugins tab, look at Stripe here, you'll notice that we list out some of the content you can do with the Stripe plugin. So there's data calls that we use to just grab some data from Stripe. And then there's actions we use, such as subscribing the user to a plan or paying an invoice. And those are actions we can use on Stripe. So what I'll do with this app is just demonstrate sort of the app running, and then I'll give you a little behind the scenes of what's going on in Bubbles to make it work. So if I just hit preview on this app, let me log out. I'll create a new user here. Log in, TJ test at bubble.io. Sign up for the app. Cool. So here's my user. Monthly recurring charges and one-time charges are zeroed out. We'll look at that in a little bit. But here's some of the things we can do: add cards, create coupons. I'll demonstrate subscribing to a plan. So hit the subscribe button. This brings up the Stripe checkout screen. So let me add some details in here. And this plan was already set up on Stripe. So that's what we're seeing on the left here. So hit subscribe. Cool. So successfully entered and I'm subscribed to a plan. Let me refresh this real quick. Hopefully, yeah. So my MRR is now $49, and one-time charges is still $0. So let me purchase a product as an example. So if I were to buy this $25 item, I had already saved my credit card information, so I'll just leave that. Hit pay. Cool. So we were charged, and my one-time charges is now $25. And yeah, so we have this invoice showing up here. That's part of the API. And yeah, let me show you from the Bubble side sort of what's going on. So the easiest way to see what happens from a button click is to just go to the button and see what's going on in the workflow. So I'll just hit this start/edit workflow. So what this is saying is when the subscribe button is clicked, it's going to run this action first. So step 1. Subscribe the user to a price. So this is an action from the Stripe plugin. So when you install it, you'll have access to this action. The plan names are, come from the Stripe integration that we have set up with this account, and that's the $49 plan. And then after this comes back, it'll go to step 2, which create a new revenue. I'll describe that in a little bit. But what's happening is it's creating this data type called revenue. A new row, essentially a new record in our data, where the MRR is 49 and the user is the current user. So if I want to see what that means, I go into the data tab. In the data tab, we have different data types. User is created for every Bubble app, but revenue here is something that I created, before this. And if we wanted to create a new data type, it's really, really easy. We can create anything here and just hit create. Or we can add a new field, like if we wanted to say refund amount, for example, like if we were tracking refunds, we could add a new field, make it a number, create it, and now we have a refund amount. You can also view the data. So this is what it looks like, from a tabular standpoint. So one row could be MRR, another one could be one-time charges. So if we go back to the workflow, that's all this is doing. It's creating a new revenue, entering it in the database. And similar with purchase, it's charging the current user, which is a different action, creating a new revenue. This one, actually the result of the first step we can use, which turns into an order and the amount received, including coupons, which is a number, and we divide by 100 because it's cents-based from Stripe. So yeah, and that's creating a record for revenue. And then it's just to use it in the app up here. This is where the magic number comes in. We're searching for the revenues. So user is current user, which will give us a list, and we want each item's MRR in this case, which evaluates to a list of numbers. And then you can run functions on those numbers. So I chose sum. You could do like average or median or other functions on a list to get the number. But yeah, so that's just the sum, the total MRR. And similar for one-time charges, except this is each item's one-time charge. So very easily can display a bunch of data in this visual way. Yeah, I think that's mostly what I wanted to show from a Bubble plugin standpoint. And yeah, I'd like to hand it off to Ben to go deeper into the demo.
Yeah, so hello. Thank you for that, TJ. Basically what we're going to be going through is how to build out a pretty comprehensive Stripe integration with Bubble, just like from a basic SaaS app perspective. So we're going to pretend like we're building an application. We want our users to sign up. We want them to pick a plan, and then we want them to be able to upgrade or downgrade that plan. So from that point of view, I think the first thing we're going to want to be doing in our Bubble application, right, is essentially we want to create those pages. We want to set it up in Stripe, and we're going to be using a really cool feature today called the pricing table, which is coming out later today. It should be going live for all Stripe merchants. So we're really excited about that. So just to start off, we're just going to go into our Bubble database, and we're going to add some of these Stripe fields. So we're going to create a customer ID. We're going to be creating a subscription ID, and these are going to be just used to track some of the different Stripe fields on the user here. So we're going to create price ID. This will track what tier you're on. Once we have that, we're just going to create a couple basic pages in our Bubble app. So we're going to just drag in here a sign up form. We're going to create another page for the pricing table. So we'll call it plan picker. We're going to create another page called dashboard, which will have some basic information. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag a couple of things into here using the Bubble editor. So we're going to drag in a couple text fields. So this one we can just say email and then plug in the logged in user's email so we know who's logged in. We can do that for a couple other fields. So we want to know like your customer ID. That. And then finally we can plug in their price ID. So when a user who's logged in goes to this page, they should see this information. And then last but not least, we want to create a nice button for them to manage their subscription. And we'll hook all this up to workflows soon, but I'm just setting up the groundwork here. Next thing we're going to want to do is actually start creating some things in Stripe. So if you go to your Stripe account, I have here already pre-populated basically a two-tier application. So you have a basic tier and a premium tier. You can kind of click in here to see it's $25 a month versus $100 a month. And what we're going to do is create a pricing table for these. So you go to pricing tables, create pricing tables. And if you don't see this in your Stripe account yet, it should show up later today because this is like a brand new feature going out today. So it's very exciting. So we're just going to add the basic tier, and we're going to add in the premium tier. So this will be a pricing table that you can just plug into any website or application, and it will let you check out from here. So we're going to click continue here. And let's see, things you can see kind of the pricing table, the payment page that they end up going to when they click one of the tiers. and then finally the confirmation page. Now what we're going to do is we're going to redirect them back after they go to their check out. So we're going to go ahead and copy our URL for the Bubble app, and then we're going to send them to the dashboard. So we're going to just say /dashboard there for both of these. And then we're going to click finish, and it'll spit out some HTML for us to copy. So we have this. So I'm just going to grab all this code here, and we're going to plug it into that plan picker page that and then, so for this specific component, we're just going to drag in an HTML component because we have this raw script here, and we're going to add one extra thing to this, which is the client reference ID. And this is going to be used later in one of our workflows to pick out the specific session. So we're just going to go ahead and plug in the unique identifier for that user. And then we're just going to make this big so we can fit the whole thing. And now we're just going to preview this page to see if it works. I'm just going to go ahead and start from the index page. And actually, while we're here, we might as well set it up so when you sign up, it sends you to this plan picker. So we open up our workflows here. And because I dragged in this component, we have a bunch of sign up and login workflows. So here's the one that happens when you sign up. We're going to have the second step to be going to the plan picker we just created. So we have that. Now let's go ahead and preview this. We're going to go ahead and sign up. And it should take us to the plan picker. Now it's loading the pricing table. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pick basic. And the old 4242. And then when it's done, it should redirect me back to our dashboard page. Now, it's not going to tell me any of the information about Stripe yet. We still have to set up the workflows that pull out the information post-checkout and loads it into the database. So right now you see it knows who I am, but it doesn't know my Stripe customer ID or my Stripe price ID. So we're going to go ahead and get that part working now. So in order to do that, we're going to be using something called Stripe webhooks with Bubble backend workflows. So Bubble has this thing called backend workflows, and in order to get it turned on, you go to your settings, you go to which one was it? API, and then there's this checkbox here that says enable workflow API and backend workflows. This essentially lets you define APIs that other applications can call within Bubble, and in this case, we're going to say Stripe's webhooks are going to call this backend API, and when certain events happen, like for example, that you've created your subscription or you've changed your plan, we want to trigger certain actions to happen in the Bubble database. So we're going to go to this new section called backend workflows here, and we're going to create, let's just create one called subscribe. So this is what we want to have triggered when someone subscribes. We're just going to check these boxes. Now, in order to define what kind of payload we're dealing with, we go to this thing called detect request data, and then click detect data. This gives us a URL that when we send a payload to it, Bubble will pick up that payload and then turn it into Bubble's data model so you can pull different information out in your workflow. So we're going to go ahead and trigger, we're going to go ahead and create a webhook for this. So we go to developers and then click webhooks and then create a new endpoint. And I think we have one already, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this one real quick so we can create another one just for this example. So I'm just going to paste in my URL here for subscribed. This gets called on subscription creation. And what we're actually going to be listening to is the checkout complete. So when a checkout session has been completed, there is another alternative where you can do a subscription created, but in this case, we want to be able to get the actual customer who created it because we don't know who they are yet. So we're going to be using checkout session completed. This should have all the information we need. So we're just going to click add event here. And then all we need to do now is trigger this event. So what I'm going to do is just go through this one more time. I'm going to go back to this plan picker page. I'm going to check out one more time, and then it should send a webhook to this specific page, and we should be able to then make our workflow. So fill out the old 4242 one more time. Okay, and now you can see here, it actually got that payload. So we have all the different fields that we can deal with here. And I should actually see in here the important part, which is this client reference ID. If you remember, I set that in that HTML. It has the ID of the unique identifier of that Bubble user, so we can pull that out to know who's actually performing the checkout. So we're just going to go ahead and save this. And what we're going to want to do on subscribe is actually update the logged in user. So we're going to want to make changes to a thing on subscribe. The thing to change is something we need to search for because we don't know who the current user is at this point. We're going to search for users who have their unique identifier equal to something in the request data, which is that client reference ID. So once to make sure that those are equal, we want to pick the first item because we are only expecting a single item out of this search. Sometimes when you're searching for things in Bubble, you can get a list of things and you need to kind of figure out which one you're trying to get. But in this case, we just need the first one and that'll get that. So then we just want to start adding in the things we actually do have, which are one, the customer ID. So in here we have the customer and we have the subscription ID. Which is this. Now, one thing we don't have yet is the price ID. Now, this is because the checkout session doesn't have that data. It only has the subscription ID. So we'll need to make a get call on the subscription and then set the price to that. Now, what does that mean exactly? So we have here the API call to get a subscription. This is just the Stripe API, right? So in here we have you have the price ID that we're trying to get, and in order to do that, we're going to use something that TJ showed us earlier, which is the API connector. Now, so if we go to, I have already set these up, so I'll just kind of show how it works. So we have here the get subscription API. So I've defined here in my key values, kind of my secret key. Please don't steal my test mode account. So we have here a get request to get a specific ID, and then we can make that call in there. I've also set up another one to create a portal session, which we'll get into in a second here. But so let me just kind of show you how to actually use this get request. So you make a step 2 here, and then on plugins we have get subscription. And then all it asks for is the ID of the subscription. So you just say result of step 1, or we can just pull it out of the request data actually. So we can just pull the subscription out of there. And then this should this step will now return a subscription. And then the last thing we want to do is one more time, make changes to that step 1 user, make changes to that same user we did in step 1. And this time we want to actually set the price ID. So we're going to pull the result of our step 2. I know this is kind of how you do it in Bubble. We want to get the plan ID. So this is essentially what we're going to do to get all the fields set in our database. So now, hopefully, when I test this, everything should work. I need to do one more thing before I actually run a test, and that is update my webhook. And the purpose of that is I need to delete this back that says /initialize because we've already initialized our webhook, and then we don't need that /initialize anymore. So I'm going to delete it. We're going to go in here, And now I'm just going to go ahead and do an end-to-end test here. So we're going to go back to back to the plan picker. And now this time, let me just remember what my email was. Ben test Stripe. Okay. Now when I subscribe, it should go through and call that workflow. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, so as you can see, everything worked flawlessly, right? We have our price ID, we have our customer ID, and I forgot to put the subscription ID, but if I reload our database, you can see that's filled out as well. Now that we've gotten that working, the next step is to let the end user actually manage their subscription. So to do that, we're going to be using something called the Stripe Customer Portal. And essentially, that's a page that you can redirect your user to and lets them manage their subscription, change their plan, do a cancellation, all kinds of very useful things that otherwise you would have to build yourself. And this kind of solves a lot of that pain. So we're going to be turning this button into that. So what we're going to do is going to be quite straightforward. We're going to go to the dashboard page. We're going to click this button and we're going to create a workflow that gets triggered when you click the button. So we click start workflow, we click here, and then what we're going to want to do is make an API call to that. If you remember, I showed you that create portal session API I defined. And it, essentially this just takes in the customer ID. And that's something we did store on the user. So this time we can use current user because we know who's logged in. We can pull out their customer ID and the return URL. We want them to go right back to this dashboard. So I'm just going to copy this URL and then paste it here. And then theoretically, that should work. Last but not least, I have to redirect them. So I'm going to click open an external website. And then we're just going to pull right out of that step the, where is it? URL. So that URL will be a Stripe portal session. And now when we click preview here, we should be able to get this all working. So now when I click this button, it's going to make an API call to Stripe, create a portal session, redirect us here, and boom, we've got essentially everything we need. So here we have, our basic plan, $25 a month. We can click update, and then we have the premium plan. I can upgrade right here. It'll prorate the $25 I've already paid, so we have only paid $75 to upgrade. Click upgrade, and we can then go back and click this go back button, and it'll take us right back to the dashboard. Now, this is not going to be reflected in our application yet, though. We still have this price ID is the old price ID, the $25 plan price ID. What we want to do is make it so Bubble is aware that the end customer just changed their plan. And for that, we're going to create one more webhook. So the webhook we're going to create here is another backend workflow. And we're going to create a new one. We're going to call it change plan. And we're going to do the same thing we did before, which is detect a data request. And copy this link. What did I say here? Yeah. So I'm just going to create a new endpoint. It's just going to initialize it. And then this time the event we want is a subscription event. So subscription.updated. This one gets called whenever you have any change to your subscription. So this is what we want. We're going to add it. And now we're just going to go ahead and do the same thing we did before, which is make the change to our subscription. Oh, yeah, I know, I made a change. Okay, I'm going to click this to create another portal session, redirect to it. And we're going to change our plan again back to basic. You can see we're charged 0 because we've already paid for it. And here's our payload. So we have all the information we need, including the plan that they changed to, right? So here's the plan ID that they changed to right here. which is what we're going to want to pull out and change in the database. So we're going to save this. And then one more time, we're going to need to do a search. So let's see, search. Make change to a thing, make a change to a user. So we're going to search for a user where their customer ID is equal to the subscriptions customer. I should have just done, well, I could have either searched for the subscription ID here or the customer ID, but it doesn't really matter. Again, we're going to pull the first item out of that search, and we're going to change one field, which is the price ID. The other fields stay the same. And then we're going to pull the plan ID, which is a price. And then that should theoretically handle all of that case. So I'm just going to delete this extra one I accidentally created. Okay, I think we're good to test this. I just need to do the final thing one more time, which is, of course, get rid of this /initialize at the end. Click update. Okay, now let's test one more time. If I go to this dashboard page, preview it. Now we're going. So this is still the $25 price. We're expecting it to change from this LFA at the end to something else. So we're just going to click update here. Update plan. Update here. And if everything worked correctly, when we go back to our application, we should be able to see, yeah, MQF. That is not the same one. So it did register the change, and the use of this is, right, you can have part of your application gated until the price has updated to the premium plan, right? So you have your basic features. I know it doesn't look like much, it's just text right now, but like, just imagine we had a check saying, oh, if you're on this price, show this. If you're on this other price, show that. You can plug in your upsell flows, all kinds of useful things using all what we've done on this demo today. And obviously, there's a lot of things I haven't covered, like, for example, cancellations, which is also a function of this customer portal, right? We can plug in handling cancellations. We could have a status field on your customer object where you can track if they're active, trialing, canceled, past due, and have certain actions happen based on those using the foundations we went over on this live stream. But honestly, that's all I really have to show. Does anybody have any questions?
So I have a question. If we could, I think two things come to mind. Number one, like if you're trying to set up these webhooks and these workflows and it's not working, where might you go to debug that? And then number two, if you're using, I think it's like user level permissions. TJ can hopefully jump in here and add a little bit of color here. There's like a permission setting too that may trip folks up. So yeah, would love to kind of just talk about both of those things.
Yeah. So the place you want to go to when you're having any issues is the logs. So the logs are pretty useful here. So you click server logs, and then you can see if we have. You can just click search. Like 2 minutes ago, this search box is amazing, by the way. You can type in like anything, like 5 days ago. It takes human readable text and does it. This is like one of my favorite like time picker things, because you just type in the text and it figures it out for you. But anyway, so you basically pull up the logs, and then you can actually see it going through your workflow. So you can see it started running the change plan workflow. That means it got the payload. It pulled the thing I wanted to change, which is the current user. So it was able to find that. I've had it happen where my search criteria was wrong. So this showed as blank, and that's how I knew, oh, I need to go back and look and fix my search criteria. Obviously, it was able to pull the price out of the payload, and then it changed it. You can see here where it actually created the portal session using that API. This was another step earlier where you click the button, it creates the portal session. So these logs are really useful for tracking your workflow runs. And as you said before, I think, CJ, there are some things that can trip you up, that trip me up specifically. One is, I think if you're dealing with users, if you users specifically, there's a lot of privacy security settings around that. Where are maybe TJ, you can jump in.
In the data tab, if you click that.
Data. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then under privacy. Yeah. So by default, we don't want to expose all of users' data to everybody. So whenever you're getting the data from the backend workflow, you don't have a logged in user. You want to make sure that the privacy settings are correct, or you can ignore them on the workflow itself. So yeah, this can definitely trip people up.
Cool.
Yeah.
We've also got a couple other questions here. There was a question about D3, I think D3JS, and if there's things built into Bubble that allow you to do maybe some like complex charting. And then we've also got questions about Connect and some other best practices. But TJ, is there any color that you could add around, like charting plugins or things you can do inside of Bubble with charts?
Yeah, exactly. So natively, there's not any built-in charting, but we do have a built element called Chart Element. Uses Chart.js, I believe, and then there's a bunch of other external plugins. So like Chart Element is the first one you see there, and when you install that onto the app, you'll see more visual elements on the in the Design tab. So then you can add charts. And I'm not sure if somebody actually has a plugin for D3, but it can certainly be built on Bubble. So that's the cool thing is. Things can be built as a plugin, as people need them.
Super cool. Let's talk about Christian's question here. What about Stripe Connect features? So I can speak to the Stripe side of stuff, and I think Ben can too. It's totally possible to create the customer portal and the checkout flows with Stripe Connect. TJ, I feel like I've seen somewhere that there was like a Stripe Connect plugin. Is that maybe that was like a community maintained plugin, or is that part of the official Stripe plugin?
That's a good question. Stripe Connect is where you're selling, your users are selling on your platform, basically.
Yeah, it's like two-sided marketplaces is the traditional use case.
Yeah, if you go to Stripe and the plugins there, you'll if you just click on that, and some of the data calls or the actions are about. I think that there is one for seller, transfer to seller, everything related to sellers, I think, register the user as a seller. So those are where you can be a marketplace, on top of Bubble.
Very cool. Very cool. So those will enable those Stripe Connect APIs.
And anything you can't find in this plugin, you could definitely build using the API connector here. Traditionally with Connect, right, you're making API calls on behalf of a merchant who has connected to you. So it would essentially be you'd have to store some sort of information about who you're trying to make an API call for. I think it's definitely possible. That's probably something to look into in the future for making a plugin, TJ.
Yeah, that'd be a fun addition for sure. Building two-sided marketplaces. So you're thinking things like Shopify or Lyft, where you're sort of enabling payments on behalf of some other business. Very, very, very cool. We've got another question here. Thanks, Christian and Sleep Deprived, for your questions. Nick asks, what is the best practice when you're selling both subscriptions and bespoke one-time purchases? In particular, where the subscription is like an add-on to the one-time purchase?
So there's a couple ways to kind of think about this. It's definitely I think best practice is one, if you already have a subscription created for somebody, and you want to like add on, add maybe a one-time invoice or something that's kind of related to that subscription. We have this feature in the API called Add Invoice Items. Basically, you update the subscription, add the invoice item to it for whatever one-time charge you're interested in charging them, and it will kind of show up under the subscription. So it's like related to it. Obviously, we have for any sort of regular one-time charges, we have just the invoice API in general, which is great for creating these one-time charges. Having a subscription be an add-on to something else, that we're definitely been thinking about add-on pricing in general, and I think that's something we will probably support in the future, where we have this complex add-on model where you have like, you have a subscription and then here's a $5 add-on, or here's like a one-time fee and you can get an add-on subscription for that. I think nothing is supported out of the box for checkout, Stripe checkout for that specific use case where you have the subscription being an optional add-on. But
yeah. So if you wanted to support maybe a setup fee or like a one-time fee that is at the beginning of a subscription, you can do that by adding, in addition to like the subscription line item where you're specifying the recurring price, you can also specify a one-time price, and that'll show up as like an additional fee when you redirect through the checkout flow the first time. If you're mid-cycle, yeah, Ben mentioned the invoices. You can create those directly to collect a one-time payment. This is really common if you have a recurring subscription business, but you need to bill like a large invoice one time where you're negotiating a contract and you've sort of like set terms with a specific user. And maybe you want to have them pay upfront for 3 years and sort of lock in a certain deal. You might do that with invoicing directly through the Stripe dashboard. I also know there's like tons of tools in the Bubble plugin for Stripe that allows you to collect one-time payments for a specific customer too. So if you have like these recurring payments, you can always sort of charge the card on file or whatever through the Bubble extension. So
yeah, we actually use that for Bubble itself. So like Bubble has a subscription model for the professional type plans. But then if you were to add a plugin, it's a one-time charge sometimes. Sometimes it's recurring, sometimes it's one time. So we actually use the Stripe plugin ourselves to add invoice items to subscriptions that already exist. So and it's built into the Stripe plugin. I think it's create an invoice item onto a subscription. Works well.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of different trade-offs too. If you're choosing between making just a one-time charge via a payment intent or via Stripe checkout versus creating an invoice, as Ben's showing here on the screen at the bottom of the customer portal, which is this Stripe hosted page where you don't have to build any of this. We have the invoice history. So one of the benefits of going the route of creating an invoice is that you'll have these PDFs that you can link out to, and you'll have the full invoice history for that customer, which can be very convenient. So very cool. There's one other question here from Sleep Deprived. Is there enterprise pricing for Bubble somewhere?
Yes, I think we have a pricing page, but I'm not sure if we have plans called dedicated right now, which is like getting onto a dedicated host. And I'm not sure if we have exact pricing, so you'd have to contact our sales team to understand like the use cases. But bubble.io/pricing lets you compare plans and things like that.
Super cool. Any other questions as we wrap it up here? It looks like maybe there was one more about refunds. So let's see. Oh, we've got, okay, so it came in via the Bubble chat. Are we able to automate refunds? Say someone makes a payment, but hasn't completed the workflow to like fully sign on. Maybe it's 14 days, and then you can automate a refund on day 14. Is that something that we could do with Bubble?
I'm not sure about that one. Do you know, Ben?
So I guess if it's something that sends a Stripe webhook, right? Like for example, like we have like past due, or I mean that's not a good one though. I do know Bubble has, I think, scheduled workflows where you, on a certain thing, when a certain thing gets triggered, you can schedule like a workflow to get triggered in the future. Am I sounding correct, TJ, on that? It's been a while since I've used them.
Yeah, I think there is time-based workflows that you can create.
So I would probably look into having one of those trigger 14 days. And then once that gets triggered at the 14-day mark, it would check this whatever criteria you're interested in looking at. And then if the criteria matches, you refund them. Otherwise, you don't refund them.
Perfect. Very cool. Ben, TJ, thanks a ton. Really appreciate your demo. Everyone that's watching, thanks so much for your time and attention. And if you want to stick around, stay tuned for future episodes of no-code content, SaaS content. We've got a lot of SaaS fundamentals content coming out soon. We're really excited to show you how to use the combination of this checkout and the customer portal in a lot of future demos. If you haven't already, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, if you want to follow @StripeDev on Twitter and follow Bubble on Twitter, and if you want to reach out to Ben or TJ, we will include their Twitter handles down or some way to contact them down in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.